Hey, now let's kick it over to our interview with Michael Katz, the Mississippi Daily Journal. He's very gracious with his time here to talk some Ole Miss football. Well, we're pleased to once again be joined by Michael Katz, who covers the Ole Miss Rebels for the Mississippi Daily Journal. And you got to give him a follow at Michael L. Katz on the Twitter machine. Michael, thank you so much for joining me once again. I really appreciate it.
Good to be here, man. How are you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. And now that the season's over, I know both of our schedules have cleared up a little bit. So before we get into the dead time of the football calendar, really wanted to just kind of go back and recap what a special season it was for Ole Miss. First 10-win regular season, of course. When you're looking back on the season that you just covered with the Ole Miss Rebels, is there one or two, maybe a game, maybe a moment or anything that really just stands out to you of what a special year this was?
Yeah, I think for me, the first one was the crazy overtime game against Arkansas, the 52-51 game that came down to a failed 2-point conversion. I think it was overtime.
Mm-hmm.
I know it was 52-51. And that was kind of a real turning point for the team, just in terms of, the defense had kind of been hit or miss. And really from that point, defense became one of the strengths for the team, which, if we're being honest, like nobody expected coming in to 2021, given how bad that defense was the year before. I mean, they gave up almost 40 points a game in 2020. I mean, they were really, really bad. And, as from that Arkansas game on, they really sort of got it together. And even when the offense wasn't clicking, that was the group that kind of got them through a lot of games. Even that loss at Auburn, defense kept them in it. And, it almost carried them to a Sugar Bowl. And, I mean, you lose Matt Corral in the first quarter, and you still almost, you're still hanging around for the better part of four quarters. That defense really kind of took that turn against Arkansas. So I think that was one of the big moments. And then I think the other one would probably be that Egg Bowl at Mississippi State. There's been so much talk about how well Mississippi State had been playing. And, they had one of the more confusing seasons with some really weird losses, but some really good wins. And, Will Rogers is one of the better quarterbacks in the country in the SEC. And, Matt Corral versus him was one that people were really excited about. And, it was a weird game. State had a lot of chances. I think it was in the second quarter when they dropped like 3 straight touchdown passes, or what would have likely been touchdown passes, and Ole Miss, seals up that New Year's Six appearance. I think those are two that really stick out to me. And then, for better or worse, Matt going down in the first quarter of the Sugar Bowl, that was kind of a defining moment where you knew that, they probably weren't going to get to that 11th win for the first time in program history, but it really just was a testament to what Matt Corral has kind of meant to this program, and just kind of the old school throwback that he is. They don't really make guys like Matt Corral anymore, and just covering him and this team was a really enjoyable experience.
And I got to ask you now, how annoying are the cowbells in person now that you've experienced the Egg Bowl?
Man, so I didn't realize. I had heard that it was an open air press box, and I didn't really know what that meant until I got there. And then I got there, and it was kind of cold. Like, I'm from Los Angeles. I lived in Wyoming for a bit, but I've gotten a little bit soft in like the 6 months that I've been here. So one, it was a little bit cold, and then two, you heard everything. And man, those cowbells got loud about the second quarter, and if I had to go, another couple years without hearing them, I would not be too upset. They're a lot. They're a lot, but it's fun. It's part of what makes football great. College football great is the environments that you're in, and that's one of the good ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you reference, how improved this Ole Miss defense was. Do you think they take a step back with, of course, DJ Durkin off to Texas A&M? How big of a loss will that be for Lane Kiffin and company?
Yeah, the defense was not perfect this year, but it was almost 2 touchdowns better than it was last year. And Durkin did a really nice job. He's, by all accounts, going to Texas A&M. I'm imagining that he's going to be very well compensated there, because Everybody at Texas A&M seems to get pretty well compensated these days. We were able to confirm today that Chris Kiffin, Lane's brother, is joining the staff, and I think it was Bruce Feldman reported that he's going to be the co-defensive coordinator with Chris Partridge, who was co-defensive coordinator with DJ Durkin this year. And it's hard to expect that same kind of level of performance, especially given what they're losing, because, not only are you losing Durkin, but you're losing Sam Williams, who, had an All-American season. You're losing Chance Campbell, who, had 100 whatever tackles and was just a real steady presence at middle linebacker. And losing Jake Springer, who was really kind of a huge part of that defense on the back end. But I think they're doing a nice job of kind of filling in the gaps. They got a really nice linebacker from Central Michigan yesterday in Troy Brown, who's a 3-time All-MAC guy, and I think he's going to be a plug and play. Is it realistic to ask him to produce like Chance Campbell or Mark Robinson, who was one of the other kind of standout linebackers, did? No, but I think he's going to be just fine. And so, is it going to be, I think they ended up giving 24 points a game this past year, which is really, really good in this era of college football. Is it realistic to expect that again? I don't know, but I think the days of them giving up like 40 points a game, I think they're past that, because I think they've recruited well. They are still strong on the back end. They've got some nice defensive backs that bought in the Iowa State kid, Isheem Young, he's a day one starter as well. And so I think they are set. I think the pass rush is where you kind of worry a little bit, because they got so many sacks. A lot of that was Sam, and a lot of that was Chance Campbell. I think he had like 6 sacks this year, as a blitzer. So I think they're going to have to find a way to get that production. But I think overall the talent's there, and I think overall they should be okay there.
Now, what can you tell us about their new offensive coordinator, Charlie Weiss Jr.? If I'm not mistaken, I think he worked with Kiffin at FAU, so there should be some continuity there.
Yeah, he was his coordinator there for a couple of years before he took the South Florida job. I will say, for the record, I did not think that I was going to be talking about Charlie Weiss in the year 2022, but here we are. I thought, as a USC grad, I thought I was done with Charlie Weiss in like 2010, but here we are. But no, I think it's, losing Levy is tough, because Jeff Levy did do a really nice job, and he brought this sort of frenetic pace that really threw teams off. And he's off to Oklahoma, where he graduated from, and that move makes sense. You can't really fault him for wanting to go back to where he's familiar with. But I think just in terms of guys that Lane is familiar with, I think Charlie Weiss Jr. makes sense. One, it's a system he's comfortable with, and two, let's be honest, the offense is going to look how Lane Kiffin wants it to look, and it's just a matter of who is going to run it. And I think Lane probably picked up some things from Jeff Levy that he's going to implement into what this next version of the offense looks like. So, is it going to look exactly the same? Of course not. But I think a lot of that is going to be due to personnel more than, really the coordinator. I think it's, is it unrealistic to expect them to go as fast as they did? Yes, because they were warp speed, and I think they were top 10 in plays per game this past year. But I have a feeling it is going to look fairly similar. Lane is the type of coach that picks things up from places he's at, and he's picked up a lot over the last couple of years, especially from Levy. And I think that this Charlie Weiss Jr. offense is probably going to look fairly similar to what we've seen from Lane in the past.
Now, any surprise from you, Michael, that Ole Miss, I don't want to say they've struggled to land a quarterback because maybe they're waiting on somebody, but it kind of surprises me that just given Lane Kiffin's reputation and his ability to coach up the quarterback position, and he just did it again with Matt Corral, there's such a huge hole there potentially. I know they likely will add a transfer quarterback, but any insight into that, or any surprise that they've not done that yet?
I think there is a little bit, at least from kind of the outside perspective, of surprise. When this whole thing started, you had Spencer Rattler in there, and you had Dylan Gabriel. And Dylan Gabriel was a guy who visited here. He was at a basketball game that we were covering, if I remember correctly. And when Levy was here, it made a lot of sense because they were together at Central Florida. Then Levy, went to Oklahoma, and I think that kind of changed things on the Dylan Gabriel front. And there have been just all these big names. The latest one, Caleb Williams, is in there, but and Jackson Dart, former USC quarterback. There are just so many names in there. But it is a little bit surprising that they haven't picked one up yet. And I think you can kind of look at it as in a couple of ways. One is, maybe they really do like what they have in Luke Altmaier. He was thrown into a pretty tough position in that Sugar Bowl, and yeah, he did some true freshman things, but he also did do some really, really nice things. He had a couple of kind of wow throws in that game, and he was a 4-star kid from Starkville. There's clearly a lot of talent there. Now, would you like to do a plug and play for a guy who's going to produce more like Corral? Of course, but those guys they do not come around very frequently. But I think there's optimism that maybe a guy like Jackson Dart, he's rumored to be here over the next couple of days as a visitor. So I think there is hope that maybe they get one of them. I think the good thing is that there's always going to be fairly big names in there because, after spring ball, there's probably going to be more guys in there. And so I think they're just kind of waiting for the right guy, and it is disappointing they haven't gotten that guy yet. I imagine it is, but I do think that they will get one of them, and but I think it could say that they are confident in Luke Altmaier. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that whatever transfer they do get, depending on who it is automatically going to get the job.
Now, how big of an impact do you think Zach Evans, the transfer running back, can make? Because we all know Ole Miss, they get this reputation as having outstanding quarterback play and all these explosive receivers, which they've had, but they have really, really run the ball well the last 2 seasons. So, I wouldn't be stunned if Zach Evans is, one of the SEC's leading rushers next season. Would you?
No, I think that was a huge pickup. They lose Jarian Ely and Snoop Connor, who had really nice years, and they were part of that kind of. It was really a 4-headed monster because, you had Henry Parrish Jr. and then you had Matt Corral who ran for, 600 yards or whatever it was. He had 4 guys with 500 yards, which is pretty crazy. Mm-hmm. Losing 3 of those guys, and it looked like it was going to be Henry Parrish Jr. as the one man standing, but in getting Zach Evans, who's a guy who, TCU's kind of been in a weird place the last couple of years, but he produced there, and he was, he was a top 20 recruit coming out of high school for pretty much every recruiting site. I think he's going to be a guy that steps in and produces immediately. I think, I don't know if they're going to have that 3-headed monster again or 4-headed monster because, I don't think Luke Altmaier runs as well as Matt Corral does, and who knows who the transfer quarterback coming in is going to be. But I think that Evans and Henry Parrish are going to be a pretty devastating combo. And then, they got a freshman coming in, Kinshawn Judkins from Alabama. He chose Ole Miss over a few SEC schools. I think he's going to be a guy that maybe pushes for a little bit of playing time. I don't know if it'll be the kind of even timeshare that, the 3 guys got this year, but I think he's going to get some carries. There is a lot of talent in that running back room with Zach Evans there. I think there was a little bit of worry that it was just going to be Henry Parrish as kind of the lone production guy. But then with Evans coming in, that instantly becomes, really an area of strength.
All right, last thing for you, Michael. I really appreciate all your time. Is there maybe the biggest question that you have or something you'd like to see answered in the spring, just looking ahead with this Ole Miss football team?
Yeah, I mean, it's going back to I hate to always harp on quarterbacks, but if you look at what Matt Corral meant to this team over the last couple of years, this team is not where it is if he's not there. And that's obviously putting a lot on him, but there's a reason he is going to be a first-round pick. He was great, and he was just sort of the heart and soul of this team. And I think that, again, to expect Altmaier or a transfer to come in and be Matt Corral, that's not realistic. But this offense does put a lot on a quarterback's shoulders, just in terms of running with pace and making sound decisions, and obviously every quarterback is a field general, but there's really a lot on the plate of an Ole Miss quarterback. And it's just going to be interesting to see what that spring battle looks like. If Altmaier is the guy there and they haven't got a transfer yet, do they feel good about him, or do they go look for somebody? And if they did get a transfer, in the next, few days or few weeks, what does that competition look like? And does the loser of that, transfer? And so there are a lot of, I think it's going to be really interesting to see that. Obviously there's the wide receiver room's losing a lot of guys. And that is a big one too. But really, for a team that relies so much on the quarterback position, I think it's really going to be interesting to kind of monitor in the next couple of months what that ultimately kind of looks like.
All right, he's Michael Katz. He does an outstanding job covering the Ole Miss Rebels for the Mississippi Daily Journal. Give him a follow at Michael L. Katz, which can be found in the show notes. Michael, thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, so just want to say thanks again, Michael, for joining the show. Again, give him a follow at Michael L. Katz. You can find that in the show notes. He does an outstanding job covering the Ole Miss Rebels. And, man, you got to believe there's going to be more stories to show up in the coming days and weeks. They're still looking to get a quarterback. So give him a follow. Check out all he's doing there for the Mississippi Daily Journal. I know he'd appreciate that. But, hey, that's all I got. Another busy week of show. We gave you 5 episodes, and it ain't even the season anymore. Find me another SEC podcast that's doing that. But, hey, that's just our way of saying thanks because, hey, we still got that passion going for the SEC. We've got terrific guests lined up for next week. Going to be hitting a number of SEC teams. Going to try to keep this momentum going for as long as we possibly can. So I do appreciate each and every one of you. We'll catch you on the next one.